Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Q1 2020 Masterclass. Today we're going to be talking about microapps, which is a very exciting topic for both Peter and myself. I'm Anna Ruiz. I am a technical marketing architect. You can follow me on Twitter at Mobile Ruiz. And with me I have Peter Prose, who is one of our lead domain specialists in everything that has to do with microapps. So we're very excited to be here today, and we're excited to hear your questions. Feel free to ask them throughout the masterclass, and we'll make sure to respond them. At the end of the session, we will have an open Q&A as well, but feel free to ask away in the meantime. So just as a little bit of an intro in case you haven't heard from us, I'm Anna Ruiz. Like I said, I'm a technical marketing architect, have been with the technical marketing team for a little under a year, but have been at Citrix wearing different hats for over 5.5 years. So have worked with small customers, large customers across some of our different technologies. Currently, I'm primarily focused on the intelligent features of Citrix Workspace. So that's one of the topics that we'll be covering today, which is the microapps, as well as analytics. So I've been working closely with the analytics product as well. I work very closely with product management to make sure that all of our products are meeting customer expectations. So definitely always like to hear back from our customers and get their feedback on what you guys think and our products. Also a UMiami grad, so if there's any fellow Canes out there, go Canes. And first and foremost, I am a mother, a wife, and definitely have always been a nerd at heart. Peter, I don't know if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Anna. So my name is Peter Prose. I am a lead domain specialist for Workspace Intelligence here at Citrix. I joined Citrix as part of the Sappho acquisition a little over a year ago. And I've been working with this, this technology that's adding the intelligence to the workspace for almost 5 years. Recently, I've been focused on the Workspace beta program. So we've been, testing all of this new functionality out with a select group of clients to get their feedback and, put the software through its paces. I'm a Cooper Union grad, studied engineering, and I spend most of my time these days just trying to learn enough tennis to keep up with my kids.
Awesome, Peter. Thank you. So just as a little bit of a recap, we do have quarterly master classes around the workspace. So if you haven't had an opportunity to look at some of our previous master classes, we cover very exciting in-depth topics. Feel free to scan this QR code and you could see all these master classes are recorded and available on demand. So feel free to take a look at some of the previous master classes that we've had with different experts in different technologies that are very, very helpful. The one from Q4 of 2019 was specific to single sign-on. So very in-depth topic. It was led by Dan Feller and Martin Sujek. Great masterclass. If you haven't had a chance to take a look, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out on demand. And like I mentioned, today Peter and I are very excited to cover microapps, which is one of our latest features within Citrix Workspace. We released it back in December of 2019, so relatively new feature that has gone into GA, and we're very excited for our customers to start testing it out and deploying this in their production environments. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Throughout the presentation, we're going to be switching back and forth from PowerPoint and demo. So we'll be covering everything from the end user side, administrative side, really dive deep into what the microapp technology can do and some of that feature and functionality that you'll be able to utilize to empower your workspace. So feel free, so make sure you stick around to watch all the demos and all the different slides that we'll be covering today. So what exactly is a microapp, right? I know for me, this was a new term when we first acquired Sappho. I wasn't really sure what it was. So for those of you that aren't familiar with a microapp, it's essentially a single use case presented to the end user from a business application. So essentially, we all know that business applications, although they are great, can be very complex and from an end user side, not very user friendly. And so with microapps, what we're allowing users to do is to present a single use case so that the user can complete tasks, can get notified of important information in a single unified location to make their lives easier and the employee experience improve. So why are they important? I covered this a little bit in the previous slide, but essentially it's all about employee experience, right? And as we're talking to different customers out there, this is a primary focus in today's world, right? Simply because it's getting, number one, very competitive out there. We want to make sure that our employees are happy, and we want to make sure that their experience is optimal. And the reality is that in our day-to-day work, we have a ton of different tools that IT provides for us, a ton of different processes and workflows, environment and behavioral norms that create a lot of noise and clutter that make it very hard to stay focused and to complete what we were hired to do. And so with microapps, what we're doing is we're essentially getting rid of that clutter and providing the end user with a single pane of glass where they can access everything and be fully productive, and where they don't have to spend, a ton of time searching and looking through these enterprise applications to figure out exactly where they need to go to complete a task. And so as we all know from a consumer experience, this is something that we're extremely used to and accustomed to, right? So the consumer experiences are great for, all the applications, whether it be social media, airline applications, shopping applications. It's just very easy for us to complete and do exactly what we want to do. I can attest to that firsthand. I have a daughter who will be 2 later this year, and she can already, like a pro, go through the iPad, the iPhone, just because they make it very easy for the end user to consume these applications and do exactly what they need to. If you look at the other side of the equation and you look at the, employee experiences and the employee applications, a lot of these applications are out of date, they're antiquated, and they're very hard to do, right? And so even for someone that might be very tech driven or, is familiar with these applications, they're still not what we would want them to be. And so as we have millennials entering the workforce and we have, just end users expecting this, we're falling behind from an IT perspective. And so really from an IT perspective, we're not meeting these expectations. We have way too many applications that are way too complex and have way too many interruptions. And what does that mean? That the end users aren't utilizing the apps to their full potential. They're wasting way too much time searching, and they have very little focus. So essentially their productivity is going down. And I actually recently read a statistic that, as technology evolved, employee productivity went up, and we're now at a point where as technology is evolving, employee productivity is going down. And the reason being is just because there's so much out there, there's so much clutter and so much distraction. And with microapps, this is what we're trying to eliminate and what we're trying to solve. So what exactly is the Citrix approach, right? We want to provide a unified access to a complete workspace. And I'm sure everyone's like, well, that sounds great, Anna. What does that really mean? And really it takes 2 steps, right? So from the first step, we've been doing this for a while now, and essentially as we're grabbing all these fragmented data applications and we're providing them to the end user in a single pane of glass. So we're providing a secure unified workspace where the user can access all of their applications, all of their desktops, all of their content from whatever device that they want to, where it's consumer friendly, it's easy for them to log on, to authenticate, to search, and providing them with that contextual security and performance. And so we're providing what I like to call the Netflix experience, where just like Netflix, I can go from my smart TV to my smartphone and pick up right where I left off. The experience is very similar, so I don't have to relearn the process. That's what we have been doing with Citrix Workspace. With microapps, we're moving on to step 2, which essentially is we're making enterprise software easy. So the best analogy that we have is the photocopier analogy, which is a photocopier has all these different buttons and bells and whistles that really are designed for those power users, for those users that need to do double-sided copies with staples and just hole punch and the whole 9 yards, right? For the most part, most users just want to do a simple copy, and all they go is go up to this photocopier and click that green button, which is the start button. And so we want to provide that green button experience with enterprise applications as well. So it's great that these enterprise applications have all these bells and whistles, but the majority of the users just go in to complete a simple thing, whether it's to approve an expense report, whether it's to submit PTO, whether it's to open a support ticket. They just need that one item, and they don't need to navigate through this complex application that's very cumbersome to do. And so with Citrix Workspace, that's exactly what we're doing. We're organizing, guiding, and automating work. So we're organizing it by providing a unified experience to the end user. So a unified experience just like we have today, but additionally adding that Microapp functionality. We're guiding them by removing that complexity and distraction. So the goal here is to make sure that your employees are doing what they were hired to do and not wasting time searching, not wasting time trying to figure out where to even go to complete some of the tasks that they were hired to do. And then we're automating it by streamlining those workflows and making sure that the end user is productive and making sure that they really get that consumer-like experience. And so Peter, after I go through this slide quickly, will guide you guys through a live demo of the end user experience. But essentially, if you're familiar with Citrix Workspace, before we release the microapps, you still have, it's a similar look and feel, but we have added the feed and the microapp. So the feed is a finite feed. So think of it not like social media where you can scroll on forever. It's meant to be a feed that is targeted to that end user, to their role, and that the goal is that as they go through their day, right, they're clearing out this feed because the notifications are relevant to them. They are timely. So let's say I go on PTO, and we'll be showing you this throughout the demo. You'll be able to expire those notifications so I don't have all this clutter in my workspace, as well as we're providing them with recommended actions. So the recommended actions would be things that they want to initiate versus the activity, which is things that they're being notified about. So an action would be, I need to request PTO, I need to submit an expense report, etc. We still have, of course, and again, Peter will show you guys this, we still have the apps and desktops, right? So just like we did with the workspace today, users can still access all their applications, whether it be SaaS, virtual apps, virtual desktops from a single pane of glass, as well as their desktops, their files, of course, which are extremely important. We have the search functionality, right? So that users can search across their workspace to find exactly what they need. And the other thing that we've introduced in tech preview is a virtual assistant, which allows users to interact with a virtual assistant. So think of it like Siri, like Alexa, like a Google Home, where I can go and ask questions and get answers quickly and easily in order to, again, be more productive. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter to go through a full end user demo, as well as go through some in-depth architecture slides after he completes that demo. So Peter, let me hand control over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Anna. So what you can see on your screen here is the desktop version of the Citrix Workspace end user experience. Now, as Anna mentioned, all of the features that are available or were available prior to the introduction of Workspace Intelligence are still available in the Citrix Workspace. So for starters, you still have access to your virtual apps, and you would be able to launch these from within the context of the workspace, and it would include all of these security features like watermarking and prevention of data exfiltration and prevention of screen capture that are provided by the Armored browser. Okay, in addition to those apps, you would also have access to the virtual desktops. So if you do need to do very detailed knowledge work, you would be able to launch a Windows or a Linux desktop and run the applications that are hosted on that desktop and complete that work. And in addition, the Citrix file control plane is available, and you would be able to access anything that's hosted on both your cloud-hosted file servers as well as anything hosted on-prem. And you'd be able to view all of it in a single place. You'd be able to execute a contextual search so you can find any file that you need or any documents that you need to collaborate on from a single search within the workspace. So there's no need to be going to a variety of different places to try to figure out where these files are stored. All of the work and all the relevant content comes to you. Now, what we're adding with the intelligence features is this feed down the middle of event-driven workflows, as well as these actions for user-initiated workflows. So the event-driven workflows are triggered by changes in the data from the underlying systems to which the workspace is integrated. So as an example, this first notification is connected to an education system like SAP SuccessFactors. So there's a new course available for registration. You can see that, and it's relevant to the employee that received this notification. So if you click on the details here, you can see in this blade that pops out details on the instructor, the start date, the end date, and if you would like, you can go ahead and register for the course right within the workspace, and it's done. So there's no need to actually log in to SAP SuccessFactors and navigate that interface in order to register for the course. You received the notification, you took the action. So there are two more notifications here from very different systems, but the workflow is pretty similar. So for this one, it's the Concur expense system, and there's details on the person submitting the expense report. You know who the employee is, you know what the value is, and you know what the expense was submitted for. And if you're satisfied as an approving manager with the information in the card, you can go ahead and approve it from right within the feed. All right. Now, say, for example, you get a notification from the sales system like Salesforce for a $12 million contract that needs to be approved. This is a bit bigger, and you'd obviously want a bit more detail before you go ahead and execute that approval. So if you click on that, it pops out the blade. You can see all of the relevant details, as well as perhaps some embedded tables or charts or other information. You can verify that all the costs line up and that everything is in line, and you can execute the approval. So three very different systems, three very different workflows, but the notification cards looked very similar. The action that the user took was very similar. And there was no need to go out to an external system to navigate a different kind of interface and figure out where the work is and how to do it. It was brought to the user, and it was very simple to accomplish. And not everything has to have an action associated with it. So sometimes there's just business intelligence that is relevant to a particular employee's day-to-day work. So for example, this sales are at 5 million. If you click on this, you could have an embedded Power BI or Tableau widget showing some particular chart or table. And once you see that, you can take whatever relevant action you decide is necessary. Make a phone call, send an email, do whatever you think is necessary. But the information that you needed in order to take that action was sent to you, as opposed to you having to proactively go into a dashboard or a reporting system and pull that information out. So those are some examples of the event-driven workflows. In addition to that, there are user-initiated workflows, and these are actions in which there's some interaction required with the underlying system of record, where the employee typically has to submit something or request something, but there's no need to actually log into the system and navigate that interface to do it, because the work is relatively simple and straightforward. A good example of this is requesting time off from a system like Workday. So the typical workflow would be navigating to Workday's cloud-hosted system, entering your two-factor authentication credentials, navigating to find the vacation section, deciding what kind of vacation it is once you verify what your vacation balance is, and then picking the days off. In this system, instead of doing that, you'd never have to leave the workspace. You just click on the button, it brings a blade out that shows you the one bit of information that does need to be pulled from that system, which is your balance of vacation days. And then you can just specify the start date and the end date, which is the only data that you really need to enter, and the purpose for your trip. And once you've entered that, the workflow is complete. And there's no need to have any formal training on exactly what's going on in Workday in order to do that. This is also a good way to abstract what system the workflow is in. So if you're entering an opportunity or something like that into a sales tool like Salesforce or a sales tool like Dynamics CRM, you could essentially have the same interface within Workspace, and all that changes is what happens on the back end. But the end user's experience is the same across all of them. And you can have these sorts of user-initiated workflows for a ticketing system, or an expense system, or various other systems as well. Finally, one of the features that's available is the virtual assistant, and that enables you to make natural language queries to these various systems, and the system is context aware. So if you ask questions about expense reports, it knows to go to Concur. If you ask questions about tickets, it knows to go to ServiceNow. So let's say, for example, you heard that there's a new employee who joined and you want to ask, who is Mia Cooper? You can enter that question, and the virtual assistant will make sure to search the directory and bring that information up. Or if you have a question about, PTO requests that were submitted for you or by you, you can enter that, and the relevant information comes up. So it knows that if it wants to do a search for the PTO request, it needs to be looking in the Workday data as opposed to the Concur or ServiceNow or Salesforce data. So this is just another way for the employees to be able to bring the information to them easily from within the context of the workspace. And everything you've seen up until now is focused on the desktop user experience, but all the same notifications and applications and workflows are available in the mobile form factor as well. So the same notifications that you would be getting from the reporting system or from any of the or the sales system or anything else would also be available in the Workspace mobile app, and you can take the same actions as you would in the desktop app. All right, so now that you've seen exactly how what the end user experience looks like, we'll go into a bit more detail on exactly how it looks, how it works under the hood, and go into an in-depth discussion of the architecture for all the various components that make up the cloud-hosted Citrix workspace.
Awesome, thanks, Peter. So let me go ahead and display the PowerPoint again, and we can go into that architecture discussion.
So now that we've seen what the end user experience looks like, how exactly do we do it in the cloud-hosted Citrix workspace environment? Okay, so this diagram gives you a very high-level overview of the various components included in the workspace. On the right, you'll see the cloud-hosted components for Workspace, and then on the left, you'll see the endpoints and systems of record to which we integrate. I'm going to go very quickly through the various cloud services just so that you have an idea of what they are and what they do. We'll start with the data integration provider in the lower left. That is the system that takes care of making the API connections to the underlying systems of record. When I say systems of record, I'm referring to any of these enterprise software systems like Concur or ServiceNow or Ariba. As well as any integrations to any on-prem systems that are integrated via the connector appliance. So that data integration provider takes care of all the reads and writes between the workspace and the underlying system that houses the data and the business logic that drives the drives the employees' workflows. The core is the Microapp service in the center there, and that is where all of the configurations for the microapps as well as notifications are kept. And that is also what manages the cloud-hosted cache of data that's displayed to the end users in the various consumption endpoints. The credential wallet in the lower right is where the service account credentials for the API reads are stored, as well as the individual user's OAuth tokens for any writebacks that are done to the systems of record. I want to highlight a point here, and we'll mention it a couple more times down the road, but for the out-of-the-box integrations, all of the reads are done via a read-only service account, and all of the writebacks are done in the context of an individual user with their OAuth token. So if there are any auditing systems or whatnot set up to see who approves what when, it will look identical if a user approves something from the workspace as if they approved something directly in the system of record. Continuing with the components, the virtual assistant component there is what takes care of the query, the natural language query parsing, and then sends the questions down into the Microapp service to query data from the cache that's relevant to that question. The analytics service is what takes the raw events that are created from the configured notifications and turns them into scored events for distribution. And then the notification service is what takes care of actually delivering those notification cards to the various endpoints. So you saw in the demo that I was giving that you can receive those cards in the desktop workspace as well as the mobile workspace, and the cards can be delivered to teams as well. Okay. Now I mentioned a system of record, so I want to point out exactly what that is and how we interact with it. So the workspace periodically pulls data from the system of record into the Microapp service, which requires a service account that has read-only permissions. And you can also tune those permissions such that it only reads data from the objects that are relevant to the workflows that you have integrated in the workspace. So as an example of that, for something like SAP Concur, there are expense modules, there are invoice modules, and there are travel modules. If you only want to create microapps for approvals of the expense modules, then there's no need for you to sync the data for the invoice or travel modules. So you can just deactivate those and only sync data for the expense modules. The generic SOR connector allows for connections to homegrown and other applications. So what's included as the HTTP connector, and I'll show you a little later on exactly how the integrations work for those in the builder. But there will be over 100 out-of-the-box microapps available for almost nearly a dozen cloud SaaS solutions as part of the GA release. You see a lot of the logos here on the right. So those provide a very good starting point for the sort of microapp workflows that we envision would be very valuable to the typical enterprise in these various systems. Okay. So I've focused on the integrations with the cloud SaaS providers, but I do want to make note of the ability to connect with on-prem systems. So as I've mentioned, the Citrix cloud components the Citrix workspace components are hosted in the cloud. So the data integrations from Workspace to a cloud hosted provider is a direct cloud to cloud connection via their API. If you have something that's hosted on-prem in your data center or virtual private cloud, and it has an API that the data integration providers can interact with, then the Citrix Gateway service would be able to connect via a managed appliance called the connector appliance that would be installed in your data center, and that would provide the plumbing for doing the reads and writes necessary to have these events. To configure notifications for these event-driven workflows. So there would be no data at rest in this connector. The data would just be purely passed through. And the cloud connector makes an outbound connection from the data center where it's hosted into the Citrix cloud, and everything else for the integration is the same as the cloud SaaS providers. So the only real prerequisite here, to doing integrations with any on-prem system is first having this connector appliance installed and configured, and then also making sure that there is an API available, preferably a REST API. Such that you'd be able to leverage the HTTP connector to do the integration. All right. So now I'm going to walk through exactly what happens when a system of record has a data sync and notification. So I mentioned earlier that the sync is set to run periodically. You can configure that per system. So say, for example, a ticketing system, since the tickets are being generated and updated constantly, you would probably want a pretty tight polling interval for that data, so every 5 to 10 minutes, whereas something like an employee directory doesn't change as often, so you'd only need to pull that data perhaps once a day or even once a week. But what exactly happens when that polling interval is triggered? All right, so first off, the Microapp service would retrieve the encrypted service account credentials from the credential wallet and request a sync from the relevant data integration provider. Then the data integration provider decrypts the service account credentials. And then the data integration provider would retrieve data from that system of record. The data is streamed back into the cache that's managed by the Microapp service. And then if there is some change in that data or new data or deleted data for which there's a configured notification in the Microapp service, the raw event related to that trigger notification would be passed on to the Citrix Analytics service, which would then score and target that notification to the relevant user or groups. And then the notification service would pass it on to the relevant endpoints. So that's how the data is synced and how it would trigger, how it would trigger a notification and would be passed on up to the relevant users. Now, in the case of a Microapp action, so what happens when you actually click a card and see the details of a particular expense report or Salesforce contract approval or change request approval? What happens when you click that card and you see the data in the blade and then take some action on it? So first off, the endpoint will retrieve data from the Microapp service to render the Microapp details. Now, I want to reiterate the point here. We're not retrieving data directly from the underlying system of record. The data that's displayed in the blade is pulled from the cache managed by the Microapp service, which improves the performance dramatically for retrieving that data. Okay, so after those details are rendered, if the user is satisfied with the data that they see and they click the button to execute the approval, the Microapp service will retrieve the encrypted OAuth token for that user from the credential wallet and then send the action on to the data integration provider along with the token. So if it's approval of an expense report or approval of a contract or a comment on a JIRA ticket, whatever that action is, as well as that user's OAuth token, will be sent down to the data integration provider. The data integration provider then decrypts that token and then sends it on to and sends that right back onto the system of record under the identity of the end user. And if the data change is successful, then the integration provider reads that changed data back, updates the Microapp service, and then the end user is informed of the successful change to that data. All right. So that is the flow for when a user takes action in a Microapp. And then again, just to reiterate the high-level structure here, when doing the reads and writes of the data, the reads are done as a read-only service account, and the writes are done using per-user OAuth tokens. So any approvals look exactly the same whether they were done from Workspace or done directly in the underlying system of record. Okay, so now I've described, in detail, exactly what the end user experience looks like and how it works. But how do you configure all of these notifications? How do you configure the integration? How do you build everything that you see in those Microapp blades? So now I want to introduce the Microapp Builder to you. What this provides is, the ability to easily integrate with the APIs provided by these underlying systems of record, as well as a no-code drag-and-drop tool for both configuring the integrations as well as specifying what information is shown in the cards and blades, as well as what actions are available. There are templates that are provided for some, for various workflows in the systems of record that are very common, and you have the ability within the builder to customize those to, show or hide data, or even build completely new workflows based on the same data. And it makes it very easy to design and build these workflows just based on your company's rules and workflows. So Anna very soon is going to go through the process for building one of these, give you a tour of the Microapp Builder. But the basic steps are, adding a new integration, which you're given a choice of various systems of record that you want to connect to. You're able to assign the microapps, once configured, you're able to assign the microapps to be subscribed by a particular subset of users or particular individuals. And then you're able to use the builder to customize the contents of those blades and those notifications. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Anna so that you can see exactly how the Microapp Builder works.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so that was an awesome explanation. Now we want to dive deep from a demo perspective into the Microapp Builder and exactly how you can build microapps for your organization. So I'm going to switch over to Citrix Cloud. For those of you that already have some of our Citrix Cloud services, you're probably very familiar with this console. For those of you that this is new to you, Citrix Cloud is where, from an administrative perspective, you will get access to all your services. So whether it be microapps, virtual apps and desktops, endpoint management, access control, etc., you name it, everything that has to do with the Citrix workspace, you manage from here. So just you'll get the different tiles for the different services, and then and then you can also, if you have available services that you can request or have trials, you would see these here, as well as your lab services. The first thing that I want to show, again, if you already have Citrix Workspace deployed in your environment, this is probably just very familiar. It'll be a 20-second recap, and then we'll dive deep into the microapps. But if you go into the workspace configuration, here is where you can do everything from set your URL, your authentication methods, right? So this is specific to your workspace, and then obviously within your workspace would be your microapp. So you would set up your authentication, you would be able to customize your workspace. So whether you want to add your personal logo or change, the different colors that your end user sees, this is where you would do it. And then more importantly, your service integration. So this, you just need to make sure that they're enabled so that when you're setting it up, your end users can actually see what you're providing for them. So we notice here that we have like the content collaboration gateway, the different service integrations available to us. And then we see that the microapps one just popped up and that it is in fact enabled. If it was disabled, all you would have to do is click on the ellipses on the right hand side and simply enable it. So this is something that I just like to show you guys to make sure that you do have this enabled before doing anything else. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go home. Again, this is where we see all the different tiles that within our services. And so obviously today we're going to be focused on the microapp tile because that's where we'll have access to our microapp builder. So I'll go ahead and click manage. Just like with our other services, we will see in a second a screen pop up that kind of gives you a high-level overview of some of the steps that you'll need to complete in order to create a microapp. So we'll go ahead and do that. And so these are the steps that Peter was talking about in his slide. We're going to add a new integration. So this essentially means that we're going to be adding that integration with that backend system, whether it's an out-of-the-box system or later in our subsequent demo, we're going to be talking about how to do a custom integration. Then we're going to be able to create a microapp and assign that to specific users. And we're obviously going to be able to customize that microapp to make sure that it meets your organization's needs and your end users' needs to the best that it can. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You'll see different integrations that I already have within this environment. And you'll also see this blue box that says add new integration. So that is the first step that you need to do. You'll see here a list of some of the different systems of record that we have out-of-the-box integrations for. So these are the ones that Peter was mentioning earlier that we do have out-of-the-box systems of record integrations. We will continue to add more and more. But we also have, and again, Peter will do a deep dive on this in the subsequent demo, a way to do custom integrations as well. So we also have demo integration. So these are if you don't necessarily have access to that backend system, but you want to play around and see what some of the capabilities are for that specific system of record, you're able to do that here. Depending on which application you're connecting to, it would ask you for different parameters. So for example, if I want to connect to something like ServiceNow, it would ask for a specific set of criteria before being able to connect to that backend system. Versus something like an SAP Concur, it would ask for different criteria. So all of this you can either do it by playing around within the builder, or we also have it within our documentation within Citrix. So for now, I'm going to add a demo integration. I'm going to do it with SAP Concur, and then I'll go ahead and click add. So this is very similar to what we would do with a non-demo integration, except I would just input those parameters so that the Microapp builder could reach out to that backend system. So we're going to see that we have this new integration that's going, and it's starting to synchronize. So this leads me to my next point. We can do different synchronization schedules within the Microapp builder. So if I click on the ellipses here, I can go to synchronization and be able to say when I want to do a full synchronization versus an incremental synchronization. So again, this is going to be really dependent on your use case and what you need to do. So for example, something like approving PTO requests, I may not need to get that immediate as a manager, right? I may not need to, hey, the second Anna inputs her PTO request, it doesn't really matter if I see that an hour later or two later, it doesn't have to be at the minute. So depending on the use case that you have, you would determine that synchronization schedule where the Microapp builder would go and synchronize with that backend system. So I'm going to go ahead and click close for now. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a microapp. So within these systems of record, you could do an out-of-the-box template, or you can also do custom integrations, right? For the purpose of this demo, we're going to be doing an out-of-the-box integration. So I'm going to click on the ellipses right here again, and I'm going to hit Add a Microapp. I'm going to get a list of templates, right, that I can utilize. So I have a blank template. So this would be if I want to start from scratch within SAP Concur, I would click on that blank template. For now, I'm going to click on the approvals demo template that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and click add. You'll notice that it's adding that microapp, and then you'll see that new microapp that has been built. The templates are extremely powerful, but just like I tell all customers, most customers will use this as a baseline, as a starting point, and then go from there and tweak and build depending on exactly what the end user needs or that organization needs. So if I click again on the ellipses over here on the right-hand side, I can go ahead and click edit. And then I have different things that I can do within that microapp. The first thing that I want to do is go into properties and be able to change that name so that I know exactly what this microapp is. So I'm going to call this the Approvals Master Class microapp. I can change the description if I wanted to, as well as change the icon. So let's say that I want to pick, let's do this thumbs up, set the icon. And then I can also enable this as an action. So if you remember when Peter was going through his end user demo, we have the ability of providing end users with user-driven actions. So this is where they would initiate like the requesting PTO, the setting an expense report, etc. For the purpose of this demo, we're not going to enable this as an action, but just know that this is where you would do that if you needed that for the microapp. I'll go ahead and click save. All the changes have been successfully changed. And now I'm going to go through the different components of the microapp that you'll be able to tweak and edit. The first thing that we're going to look at is the notifications. So one thing to note is because we did pick an out-of-the-box template, you see some of these that are already pre-populated and pre-built for us. If we were to pick a blank template, or when Peter will show next in his presentation, if you were to do a custom microapp, right, these would be blank and you would have to add all the notifications that you need from scratch as well as all of the pages. So the reason why we're seeing information here is because we did choose an out-of-the-box template. However, even within those templates, we do have the ability to customize it. So for example, if I want to look at this action required notification, I can click on the ellipses, click edit, and once again, I'm able to tweak everything that is for this specific notification. So I can, within a notification, I can tweak when we're going to run this, what we're going to be checking. If I want to add conditions for that specific notification, I can do that. who do I want to notify, right? So just because I'm subscribed to that specific microapp doesn't necessarily mean that maybe it's relevant for me to get notified of certain things. So you can target and tweak that. I can change the icon, change the title, change the body. One of the things that I want you to notice is here we have different variables. So for example, here we have the total currency. In order to make these notifications not just be some static text, right? To provide, like Peter was saying, important information so that the user can potentially, even within that notification, complete different actions. We also here can add actions within that notification. So here, within that notification card, I can approve or send back that specific expense. Again, we don't need to provide actions to the end user. Some notifications are just notifying me, right? Like maybe I want to notify an end user that there's a new class that they may be interested in, or that there's something going on that doesn't require an action for them to complete an action, then I just wouldn't have any action associated with that specific notification. And then the important thing to note is the expiration. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that the activity feed for the end user is a finite feed. We don't want this to be an infinite feed, kind of like social media where you can scroll on for hours. And the reason being is we want to reduce that clutter and that information overload, right? So if I'm on PTO, if I'm on leave, if something happens where when I come back, that notification is no longer relevant, I don't even need to see it anymore. And so as an administrator, I can set expirations and set different conditions so that the end user can see only things that are targeted, that are timely for them. So I think that's something very important, something cool to note. The next thing that I'm going to walk you through is the pages. So the pages are, again, when Peter showed whether we clicked on a specific notification card and needed more information, that's what popped up on the right-hand side for the end user. Or if I'm doing a user-initiated action, again, that's what popped up on the right-hand side. So when Peter was requesting PTO, where he inputted that information, that's what we call the pages. And again, the reason why we're seeing pages here populated is simply because we picked an out-of-the-box template, but when Peter will show in the next demo, this will be blank. So you would have to create this from scratch. Again, just like with the notifications, even though we did have an out-of-the-box template, we are able to edit these pages if needed. So I'll go ahead and click Edit. And when I edit, I can see exactly what's been provided for me. I can also see, like Peter was saying, the no-code drag and drop builder. So I can add buttons, I can add text, images, data, whatever I want, I can go ahead and simply drag and drop. I'll show you, for example, if I want to add a text input that the end user can input, I can go here. I think this is a little bit large for my taste, so I'm going to change this to medium. You see that it's automatically moving around so that the administrator, it's easier for me to do this. I can maybe say that this will be search by owner so that the user can search by owner if he has a lot of pending reports left. And then now I'm able to tie this text input with this table, right? So if I click on the table, I can say, hey, I want to add a filter. I want to add a new filter, and I want to make sure that if I scroll down, that the owner name contains that component value. The component is what we just added, which is this search by owner. If you had multiple text inputs, you would see a drop down of which one you want it to be. And I'm going to go ahead and ignore it if empty. You can see that I can add multiple conditions to this table, so really tweak it and target it to meet your needs. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. The other part that I think is extremely powerful, and that just talking to some of our developers who have had early access and have already started building a lot of microapps is very powerful, is the ability to preview the page as you're building it. So I know it could be very frustrating if you were building something and you needed to now log out, log in as a user to see the experience. I can now simply click on preview page, and I'll actually let me as an administrator, as I'm building it, be able to see what my end user would see once they would be subscribed to this microapp and interact with that microapp exactly like my end users would. So I can see everything from the icon that we've provided. I can see the different tables. I can see that now I've added this search functionality, and I can even test out that search functionality to make sure that it's exactly what I want it to be. So if I click on, if I type Stella, we could see that now only Stella's reports are showing up, right? I didn't even have to type her full name. I just typed STE. And then, you know, here I can click on view details, which would take me to a different page in order to be able to see those details and approve it. Just like Peter showed, end users can have a desktop view, but we know nowadays a lot of people use mobile instead. And so as an administrator, I can also preview the mobile version of that and interact with it as my end users would. So very powerful. I don't need to have a mobile device and pull it out and authenticate in order to see exactly what I'm building. So I'll go ahead back into my microapp that I'm building. I like it for what it is right now. So I'm going to go back into my microapps. Oops, I exited one too many. And then within here, I can go and add subscribers, right? So just like with our other cloud services, we need to, once we've created an application, now we need to go and tie the end users that are relevant to that specific microapp or to that specific application. And so I'll click on the ellipses right here, click on subscriptions, and I'll be able to choose the domain that I want them for. So if you have multiple domains within your environment, you would be able to pick that. And then you're able to provide the end users with subscriptions, either a full group or a user. So if I type something like Anna, I can either do it to a specific user or to the group that I have available. So we see that now we have subscribers to that specific microapps, and I can go ahead and X out. Now this radio button is actually green because now I have subscribers to the approval masterclass microapp that I just built, and now my end users would be able to have access to that microapp and interact with that microapp like they would. So hopefully within, you know, this short administrative demo, you were able to see just really the power of our microapp builder and how you can start implementing it and adding it to your environment. Now the next thing that we're going to talk about and get into is different integrations, right? So with my demo right now, I showed specific to both the system of record and a microapp that had an out-of-the-box template. But we also understand, and one of the questions that we get from a lot of customers is, well, what about the other integrations, right? Like what's on the list for Citrix, or when are you going to come out with application ABCD integration? And, you know, while we're building a lot of integrations, and we're going to continue to release more out-of-the-box integrations to make our customers' lives easier, as you could see within the builder that I built a microapp from scratch in less than 15 minutes. We also understand that not every single application out there and available will have a template for, right? Simply because there's customers that have a very specific application, maybe it's a homegrown application, an on-prem application, or even a cloud application that we just haven't built that template for. But we want to provide you those tools, that flexibility, that functionality to be able to still utilize the microapp builder and give you that power. And so what we provided, and Peter will be demoing after I talk through it, is the HTTP integration. So this essentially allows you to build custom integrations to backend systems. So just similar to the API clients you know today. And what you're able to do, I'll build this slide out, is essentially be able to build your custom microapps. You can talk to them through REST API or JSON. And you're able to connect to on-prem systems as well. For on-prem systems, like Peter talked about through the architecture slide, they would require that additional connector component in order to connect back. But after that, right, you would be able to build those custom microapps as well. And so just a visual representation of what we're thinking is great. We're going to continue to build this ecosystem of, different applications and integrations. We're tapping into our developer community as well to help us build that. But we also want to give you the power to create custom microapps specific to your needs for custom applications that we may not have thought of or aren't currently working on. And so this is where you come in, and with the HTTP integration, you're able to do that. And so the way that it works is essentially through our HTTP integration, we'll be able to talk to that backend target system. The one requirement is that that backend system needs to be able to communicate through JSON or REST APIs. And so as long as it meets that requirement, we're able to connect to the microapp service and create microapps just like I showed you in the demo earlier. If you have an application that for whatever reason doesn't speak JSON or REST API, whether it's a legacy application or a custom application, you would need an additional requirement, which is building an API wrapper. We're not going to dive deep into that today, but if you are interested in seeing just one of the ways that you can build an API wrapper, we have a video out there on techzone.citrix.com that walks you through how to build an API wrapper with Azure Functions. But just know that you do have options and flexibility in case your application is, a legacy application that can't communicate through JSON or REST APIs. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Peter, who's going to walk through the HTTP integration demo and walk you through how you can connect with some of those custom applications. So Peter, I'm going to go ahead and give you screen controls one more time, and that way you can walk us through that.
All right. Thank you very much for that introduction to the Microapp Builder. So you can see I have a very similar screen up to the one that Anna was showing you. This is a different instance of the workspace. And I'm just going to walk through a very simple example of doing an integration with the HTTP connector to a REST API that's surfacing JSON data that uses the OData protocol. So the first step is to click the Add New Integration button. And the one that we want to use is this HTTP integration. Start off by giving it a name. And the base URL is the critical first piece of data that you need to configure this. Now, this is dependent on the REST API that you're going to be integrating with. It will typically be some very the shortest URL that will get to all of the relevant endpoints for all of the different data that you want to integrate with the system. So in this case, I'm going to use this free demos web service that's available from the OData standard organization. They have this read-only demo service here. You can see the URL up there. I'm going to use this as the base URL. So I'll go ahead and copy this and paste it in. And that will provide, so that's the base that we're going to be using for this. In this case, there's no authentication associated with this, but if there is basic or NTLM or bearer or OAuth2 authentication associated with the web service you want to integrate with, you're able to set that up here and supply any of the necessary additional parameters. In this case, there's no authentication, so I'm going to use that. And there's not going to be separate authentication for users in the actions. As I mentioned earlier, any reads are done with the service account and writebacks are done with the individual user's OAuth token. The exception to that is these HTTP integrations where you have a choice of either using the service account to do reads and writes, and then including a tag to specify who the logged in user is. Or you can do it the same as you would for the out-of-the-box integrations and actually have a separate authentication for the actions. But in this case, we're going to keep it very simple. So it's read-only, there's no authentication, and this is the endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and add this as a new integration. That just takes a couple seconds to build. And once that's done, now we have the skeleton of this blank of this blank integration. You can see that it has all the same properties and parameters as the demo integration that Anna was showing you earlier. The first thing I'm going to do is add a data endpoint so that I can start loading up some tables so that we can start building some microapps on it. So to add the data endpoint, you'd click this button here. Now, if I actually click on this service, you can see that there's just kind of standard output from this web service, and this is just very basic very basic set of tables that are provided for these these various objects. So products, persons, advertisements, things like that. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to focus on the products. So what we're going to do is set products as the endpoint name, and that is also the endpoint URI. Now, just so you can see, if I specify products in this in the URL here, the output of this is that so it's shown as XML here, but basically it's this JSON output. So it's obviously not very user friendly to read, but this is the text that comes back on the wire when the request is sent. So what does the HTTP integration do with that information? So first off, I've specified the endpoint name and the endpoint URL. If I click test service, it's going to run a quick check. Okay, so when it made the request, it got a 200 response. Now, what did that response look like? You click here, you can actually see the response body. And from here, you can see that it actually looks a lot more human readable, user friendly. You can see the type of the data, and you can see that it's very simple tabular data with all this information about the various products that are available: bread, milk, soda, coffee, things like that. All right, so once that's done, you can load the tables that are affiliated with it. So if I click load tables, what this does is send that same request down to the system and then parse the response to create a table called products_value. Now you see here the primary key isn't set, and all tables must have a primary key. So I'm going to go ahead and click edit attributes. And you'll see here that what the integration provider has done is take that first snapshot of data from that web service, parse it out, and infer what all of the columns are, as well as the type of all of those columns. So it could understand that there was a name, a price, a rating, a release date, just based upon the data that was available in that returned JSON data structure. Now, what I need to do here is specify a primary key. So I'm going to go ahead and use the ID as the primary key, save that. And then I'm ready to go ahead and add this as add this integration. All right. So now we see here the products endpoint, or sorry, the products endpoint has been included. And now I'm going to go ahead and add one more endpoint. This time I'm going to add persons. And again, I'm going to do a test of the service. Now view the response body. Now, again, you can see that it has pulled in, a very different type of OData JSON response, but it's able to take that response and load tables on that as well. So we've created a persons value table. Again, does not have a primary key, so I'll have to look at it. And you can see here that it was able to infer the names of the columns as well as their data types, and just needs me to specify a primary key for that data. Go ahead and click save. So now we have two integrations that are available. You can see that the two tables, I believe I forgot the one last step there. There was a save. So it's a pretty quick procedure. Click on save and click add. Okay, so now we have both products and persons included as endpoints. And you can see that each of those also has an associated table. Now, I'm not going to do that as part of this demo, just in the interest of time. But if you do have if you do have relationships that you need to define between the various tables, and typically you would need to do that for these because there is some complexity there, you would define these relationships within this relationship builder. This is something that's done automatically for the out-of-the-box integration. So obviously you'd be able to, associate for example, ticket types to individual ticket objects in something like ServiceNow. But in this case, for the HTTP connector, you would have to be building these. You'd have to build these manually, but you'd be able to specify, which is the primary table, which is the foreign table, give an alias for it, and then specify which fields are related between the two. And you can add multiple columns so that you can have a compound relationship between the two entities. Now, for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to build a very simple microapp on top of the products table. So if I go back out to Microapps, so you can see now that this masterclass demo integration has been created, but there's no microapp here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a microapp. And for the HTTP apps, or for the HTTP integration, since there are no associated template apps, there's no dialog that would come out saying that you have particular template apps available. It just creates a blank microapp, and then you can go in and configure it according to your requirements. So if I click Edit, the first thing I'm going to do is give it a better name. So this will be Products, and I'm going to give it a better icon. So there's several items that you're able to choose from here. I think I'll just go with dollar icon. You can save that. So now we have the products micro app. Now I'm going to build a page for this one. I click add new page. So there are several options available here. You've seen what these look like in the end user demo that I was giving earlier. So the detail and form are basically what would pop up on the blades. If you clicked on a particular card, it would show, if there's something where it's just view only, it would be detail. If there's something where you can edit some of the fields and take some action, then it would be a form. And then you've seen some of them that have embeddable tables. In this case, I'm just going to create a very simple one with the table type here. And then you can select the data source. Now, in this case, I'm choosing the masterclass demo data source that I just created. And I'm going to choose the products table. And then you get to choose which fields are included in the table. So in this case, I'm going to include everything except the ID, because that's just an internal key. I'm not going to include the OData type either, because that's not really relevant. So once I've specified that, I can say set fields. And that creates the page. Now I get a live preview in this microapp builder for the data that's shown that was synced from that OData JSON service into the HTTP integration provider. Now I can do a bit more configuration from here. So you got the tour of all of the components that are available, as well as the live preview and the the ability to do some formatting. In here, I'm just going to make some quick changes to this table just to show how easy it is. So first off, I don't think the discontinued date is particularly relevant, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And then I think it would be better if the name were the first column instead of the description, so I'm just going to swap those two around. And then the price should be shown as a currency instead of this decimal looking number. So I'm going to go ahead and expand that. And then you can take this and choose from one of the formats that are available here. And I will go ahead and pick the currency format. Okay, and then it's a lot more user-friendly. It looks a lot better. Now you can add, a title to this. You can start adding additional fields above or below the table. But this is basically how you would be building one of these. So you would start with, the wizard, specify the data that you want to show, either in the table or the individual fields, and then add any formatting, and then specify who has access to this. So to do that, I'm going to go back out to the microapp management page. So now that I've created this products micro app, I'm going to make one change here to add myself as a subscriber. Do a quick search. I will add myself as a subscriber to this micro app. And then I'm also going to specify that this micro app page that I built be the action. So there's the products page, and if a user wants to see that, if a user is subscribed to that, then they'll see it as one of the action tiles available in the workspace. I'll step out, and now I'm going to preview the micro app. All right, and now that we've created this micro app, I can go ahead and preview it. So from here, I will click on the preview page link. And once this renders, it will show me what the end user would see when they click on a card that would bring out this particular micro app. So as you can see, you have the table, it's scrollable. You can see all the individual items here. And if you wanted to, you could, so right now we already have, so we have the products table. There, in addition to that, there is a products details table that's provided by the OData JSON web service. So you would be able to create another endpoint to product details, and then you'd be able to click on one of these individual rows, and that would open another blade showing those individual details. So you're able to go basically as far as you want with these integrations, depending on what data is available from the system you're integrating with, the relationships, and how much is exposed by the API. So I think the diagram that Anna was showing earlier of basically a person sitting in front of their computer with a question mark saying, what is the next integration? It's basically up to the whoever is has the knowledge of the API, has the knowledge of the data structure of the workflows, and once you know how to use this builder, you're able to build these workflows to be pretty much whatever you need. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Anna, for a wrap up.
Thanks, Peter. That was great. I think everyone here found it informative, and it's just a great way of showing the flexibility that you have with the Microapp Builder. Like I mentioned, the out-of-the-box templates are great, the out-of-the-box systems are awesome, but we do give you as a customer that flexibility to build your specific microapps for the specific applications. And like Peter said, it's a matter of your imagination and what you want to build. Really, we give you a lot of flexibility to build really specific to your needs. So with that, we're going to do a quick summary, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So I know we've been getting some questions throughout, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation, and as well as take any new questions that have that arise. So hopefully, in the past, I don't even know, it's been over an hour, I guess, we were able to show you really the power of Citrix Workspace, but more specifically, one of the latest features that we released December of last year, which is Microapps, right? We want to make sure that you're aware that with Citrix Workspace, you're able to organize, guide, and automate work. And we just want to give you those tools in order to make your employees really productive, in order for you to really take on the future of work and be able to provide your organization with an amazing employee experience so that your employees can be happy and fully productive. One of the things, for those of you that are not aware of techzone.citrix.com, I mentioned it earlier, we have some great content out there, not just specific to the microapps. We do have microapp content out there where we do just overview similar to what we did here, just a little bit shorter, as well as we have a full-on demo of how to create an API wrapper. So taking even what Peter had a step further for some of the legacy applications. So feel free to check it out. You can either access it through techzone.citrix.com or scan this QR code. And like I mentioned, we have information, technical deep dives, not only on microapps, but on all of our Citrix technology. So everything from analytics, networking, mobility, file sharing. So everything you can think of, we're constantly creating and updating content out there. So make sure to check out TechZone. Peter and I want to thank you guys. We were very excited to present this content for you, and we hope that you found it beneficial. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to Q&A. I'm very excited to have another guest join us to be leading that Q&A, Ingmar. He is part of our Compete team. So feel free to continue to ask questions. And Ingmar, I will turn it over to you so that you can take charge of answering some of the Q&A that our audience has. Again, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys being here.
Hey everyone. If you've sent in a question, I've entered them in your system. You should have received an email. If not, feel free to unmute and ask me now. So we're going to open it up for questions. Hey everyone. So we're getting quite a number of questions coming in through the chat pane. So I'll answer them through the Q&A. If anyone wants to do it in person, feel free to unmute, and then more than happy to answer them for you. So one of the questions that come in multiple times is on if Citrix Cloud is included in the Workspace Suite license. I don't think it is. It is a perpetual license. In order to use Citrix Cloud or Citrix Workspace Cloud, that's a subscription. So you probably need to transition into a cloud-based subscription, and that will include a cloud or access to the Citrix Cloud, as you've seen today in the master class. By the way, that does not mean you'll need to move all your workloads to the cloud. It is a hybrid solution, right? So if you are using CVAD today, formerly known as a Zen app or Zen desktop, you can just keep that on-prem and end up in a hybrid situation. So that's probably something you'll need to discuss with your sales rep, like what the path is from a Workspace Suite license or any other traditional license you have into a cloud-based subscription. Another good question is related to the frequency of syncing. How does more frequent syncs impact the cost of the Microapp service? That really depends on the APIs you're using. At this point, there's no additional cost that I'm aware of on how often you query an API. So far, that's being fair use, but obviously, since you are querying a remote API, other vendors or systems of record like SAP or others, they can charge based on the amount of API interactions. So that might impact cost for the total solution, but not for the Citrix Microapp solution. Another great question was basically on trials. Yes, you can get a trial on Microapps if you're already a Citrix Cloud customer and you would log into your management plane, which, by the way, is available in the US, EMEA, and APJ. You will see a new tile coming up, which says Microapps, and there you will have the ability to request a trial. If you're not a Citrix Cloud customer yet, there is a developer site, which is developer.cloud.com. And that's where you can request a demo instance. And yes, definitely you can start experimenting experimenting with your integrations. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to reach out to us, either to your sales rep or one of the available options which you'll see there. So another question on licenses: is Microapps additionally paid, or is it part of the license contract? So there are a number of, let's say, editions of Citrix Workspace. There are Citrix Workspace Standard, Premium, Premium Plus. Microapps is part of all the editions. So whatever edition of Citrix Cloud or Citrix Workspace you're getting, you will have Microapps. There are some minor differences. If you want to connect to, for instance, on-prem applications, then there's probably another, either an add-on SKU or there's another edition that you need. Probably best is to go to your sales rep and discuss what the options are here. Good question. Will there be a Microapp store that Microapps we may develop could be submitted for others? Definitely in the consideration. That's definitely something which is moving forward, the idea of the Citrix Workspace platform. So not sure on the timelines, not sure on when and how, but yes, definitely. So the goal is that developers, either organizations or the ISVs itself, provide the templates which can be used by customers or partners to buy or provide for free, so that the integrations will grow over time. For those that are interested in developing the Microapps, either for themselves or maybe as to provide them in a store later on. Late last year, we organized Citrix Converge, our first developer conference in Santa Clara. It's good to know that in Q1, I think it's late Q1, we will have another one in EMEA, and there will be another one in APJ. So each region will have its own developer conference. And obviously the goal is to bring it again back to the US, probably end of this year. No timelines on that yet. If you want to get involved in the developer community, there's still, developer.cloud.com. There are Slack channels where you can join and meet up with the other developers. So some questions on the best way to stay connected, on the future of either out-of-the-box application integrations, also some questions on best practices on developing internal micro apps. So two ways. I guess one is just subscribe to the regular channels of Citrix, so that's the blogs and all the other channels that we have, to the newsletters. If you're specifically interested in the developer side of things, and again, developer does not mean full code. That's not developer kind that we're talking here. We're talking about low code, so it's more the citizen developer, if I may say. Developer.cloud.com. That's definitely the way you want to get involved in the community space. So we have no more questions coming in. Wrapping it up for this webinar. I'd like to thank you for joining. See you in the next webinar. If you'd like, there's another webinar at 2 p.m. You've already seen this one. But feel free to join another masterclass later on. Again, thanks for joining. Thank you for the great questions, and have a great day.